We're on the air. Welcome to 12.3's weekly Zoho training classes. Today we're going to talk about the Zoho One admin panel. I chose this one to start because anybody who has Zoho One, you have to start here. Zoho makes it real easy to say, set up with a trial, you get it, but then you don't know what to do. And you have to actually do a little bit of work to get your Zoho running. To get it provisioned properly. And even if you have it and it's running, there's probably some things you can learn. So I see today not taking too long. I'm going to go over kind of in linear fashion the features of Zoho One. This is really for administrators. Probably a few things you need to do to your systems you weren't aware of, and then we'll take questions and answers afterwards. We'll stop recording at that time so you can ask whatever you want. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'm on the 12.3 website. I'm going to log into Zoho. And actually all of your users could start here, and that is at one.zoho.com. And you'll be asked to log in. If you've logged in before, you'll probably know who you are. I log into a lot of systems every day, so I'm going to log into a demo account that we have. Zoho provides it. One reason I'm recording these shows is because there's no longer any live data in here. This is totally a play system. And I am logging in as an administrator. It will take me to the Zoho One welcome screen. Now, if I were not an admin, I would not see admin panel here, but I am an admin, so I get the panel. We're going to spend most of our time there, but I do want to show you most users will come in and see what's called My Apps. These are all the applications that have been turned on for them. The reason we have this panel is that Zoho gives you 45 applications, and you may want to control who your users are and which apps they have access to. Imagine if you have, currently right now, if you're, say, an IT manager, you hire a new person, you got to get them a license for the CRM system, maybe a license for the accounting system. You got to get them Word and Excel and set up an email, and you got to get them all the apps they need and set them up as users in those apps. And Zoho's no different. Back when Zoho was 40 different applications, you had to add them to CRM, add them to campaigns, add them to books, everything. Now you do it all in one place right here. Makes it much easier. It's also much easier when someone leaves the company, you just deactivate the account. You don't have to go into each account and take them out. So this is really how you administer the whole system. It is for the admins, but anybody who gets a new Zoho One system will have to come through here. So these are the apps that I've been turned on for me. I think there's 35. Zoho has 45, so 10 have not been turned on. If you're a brand new Zoho user, you'll probably only see a handful of apps. So I'm going to go down to the admin panel because I'm going to administer Zoho, and we're going to kind of walk down it in a line. The first thing Zoho will take you to when you open up the admin panel is called the dashboard. It's kind of a security thing. It's interesting to see. Our demo system here is only a 2-user system, but it's telling me I have 2 users. I have 34 apps turned on, no groups. We'll talk about that. It tells me who's currently logged in and where they logged in from. This is, again, a dashboard just to kind of show you what's going on with the system. This is over the last 7 days, but you'll see if I change this to, say, last month, it shows that this user logged in from Fort Lauderdale, which I happen to be in Fort Lauderdale. But if you see a Tokyo sign-on and you know none of your people have been in Tokyo recently, it's telling you that someone's got a password. So it's just kind of telling me who's logged in, what apps are the most popular. That's the dashboard. You might want to look at this periodically just to see who's using it, who's not, where they're using it from. The next section here is called organization. You should go in here just once. I'll show you the kind of things that are in here. For one thing, there's a thing called an owner, and this is the person who owns the account. It's really Zoho's point of contact. If your credit card doesn't renew, if there's a problem with your system, they want to contact somebody. So that's the owner of the system. It's usually the admin. In this case, it's a guy called User One. You can, in the organization page, there's a few things I highly recommend you do. First off, you can give your company a logo. You'll see it all over different Zoho apps. You just hit edit logo and then you upload your logo. Pretty self-explanatory. Under edit here, I'm going to edit all this information. And there's a company information, and I missed it already. So I already put it in. I'm only allowed to change certain things now. But what you want to make sure you do is set your time zone. Quite often, out of the box, Zoho will be on the Pacific time zone. People sometimes come to me and say, all their appointments are showing up 3 hours off. And it's because you schedule them Pacific time. You can also set your language. Zoho is multilingual, so as a company, if you want to be in German, you can. You can also have individual users use German if they want to. I have one client that is multi-currency. They have offices in Mexico. Some of the users use a Mexican system. So set up your organization info. Most importantly, the time zone and the language. It'll probably default to English if you hit a North American data center, but it all depends on where you are. I did not put in a phone number yet or a fax number, but you can go to the edit button. You can also have multiple locations. I've put in a second location. We have an office in Syracuse. I can assign users to that office. So if you have multiple locations, you put them in there. I don't even know what designations are. It appears to be some form of groups, which I am going to talk about down here, but I didn't add any. So one time, set up your company, and this information will populate all over all the apps. It's a good place to do it. Little thing for people on Eastern time, when you set your time zone, there are like 100 time zones around the world. If you're in Indiana, you do daylight savings time differently than if you're in Maine. So these time zones, there's a standard around the world called Olsen time. Zoho follows it. If most people were on the East Coast, you want to say new_York, and it will take care of Eastern Daylight Time when it shifts. If you pick Eastern Daylight Time, you'll kind of be on it all the time. So I always search for the new_York. If you just type that in, it'll pop it up for you. There's a lot of places on kind of Eastern Time, but not exactly. Under applications, I'm going to see what applications are currently turned on, how many users can use that application, and then groups I'll talk about in a minute. So for instance, books, only one user is allowed to use it. I can click on books and then it'll show me who. If I want to add an application, for instance, I said we have about 35 turned on. There's still 10 that are not turned on. I come up here to add application. And it's showing me, I could add Zoho Backstage, which is kind of like an Eventbrite thing. It's event management, so I can just add it. In this case, they want to know if I have it will give me a website that I can put my events on. Someday we'll do a session on this, but I'm just going to call it Demo 112.3. That's the name of my demo company. That name is available. And now we have a website and we can start putting events up there. So I've just turned on Backstage. And by default, I'll be a user of it. If I go back to my applications page here, Backstage is turned on. It's got one user. That user is me. So that's how you add applications. If you don't want to use Backstage, you wouldn't add it. You don't want people in there. Normally, you can't assign apps to people until you bring them into your system. And this is how you do it. Add the app. If I click on an application, so I'll click on CRM. It shows me that 2 people are allowed to use it. And it also, CRM has security within it. Every app in Zoho can have a secondary security layer. So I'll have security here for all of Zoho, but maybe in Zoho Books, which is the accounting app, the CFO needs to be an admin. They can do anything in there, but I might have a bookkeeper who does not have check writing ability. So I create a security role that only lets them do certain things. And so I go in here. And in this case, for CRM, I am an administrator, but this other user is just what's called a standard user. So they can't add people and change passwords. You probably don't want everyone to be able to do that, but it's showing me everybody in the company who's got access to this app. I can change the owner of the app if I don't want it to be me. For instance, and we'll get to service admins a little bit later, but this is a good way to see who's got access to what app. And that's applications. I turn them on. If I want to assign this app to another user, I would have to add the user, but I could just pick a user, pick what role and security profile they have, and then give it to them. We'll do that in a minute. So now I'm going to go to users, and this is a list of all the users in my system. I have 2. I'm the admin user. This is the standard user. Again, this is a little demo system they give us. I'm allowed to go in here and mess this one up for training purposes. Admin user has access to 35 different apps. He's logged in 10 minutes ago. I'll just click on this to show you some of the detail you get. In here are the apps he's been given, so I can see in detail what level of security he's at. Under account activity, I can actually see his past logins and what IP address he was at, what service he logged into, whether he was on a mobile or on a browser, last time IP address. So a little bit of detail as far as, is this person actually using it? What apps is he using? And I can look at security policies for this person. And we'll talk about that in a minute too, because there's a lot of different security things you can have. I could change his password and I can force his multi-factor. We'll talk about that. And he is the owner of the system. So there's all this detail about each user. And then I can look at standard user here and I can see that he's only got 6 apps turned on. I can add an app to him just by clicking the plus here. If I want to give them the new Backstage app, I click on it. And again, some apps, you just give it to them and they have it. Other apps, you have to tell the system like what role within the app. We'll let him just be a user, not an admin of Backstage. And this department is not available. You don't have permissions. Maybe I got to do something there. We'll do something simple like give him Zoho expense. Looks like he got it anyway. Oh, Zoho expense has a lot of questions. And again, we'll do the expense tracking in a future one. Pick a department. There is no department. So I'm going to get an error again. Nope, got added. So now he's been given expense. He didn't get Backstage because I probably have to turn something on there. But this is how easy it is to just give somebody an app. Next step are the administrators. This system has 1 administrator. I recommend you might want to have 2 in most cases, because if admin user gets hit by a bus, no one's going to be able to get in here. So I can add another user and make him an admin. He's an admin of the entire system. I guess his name is standard. He's an external guy. I'm going to fix that. I got to go back to users for a second. I'm sorry, I missed an important point. Let me go back to users. I'm going to try to add another user. Probably won't happen, but I'll just put add Josh. Alan, got an email address, josh@123.com. He really doesn't. I just want to talk about the process here. When you add someone to your system, you do not give them a password. You do not create their account. You set this up, and they will be then emailed an invitation to join the system. I'll hit add. I'm only allowed 2 licenses here, so I can't add a third person, but pretend I can. So you add someone to the system, they get an email, they click on a link in that email and activate their account. They give themselves a password. But beyond that, you kind of control their security and what apps they can get into. So that's the process. Is you invite them into the system, they accept it. Now that link to join the system only lasts 7 days. If it goes into their junk email or they say they never got it, you'll be able to click on that user and resend the invitation. There'll be a button over here. It'll say that they're a pending user. They've never activated their account. And you can hit the resend button and send them a fresh invite. That invite will only last 7 days. So that's how you get people into the system. If I don't want someone to use the system anymore, I bring them up and I hit deactivate, and they're out. So again, you don't have to go into 45 different apps and remove their account. Just deactivate them. And in fact, when you do deactivate someone, so we have a list here of what are called active users, but at the top I can click on inactive users and all my deactivateds will be here. Pending users are users that have not been invited, but haven't activated their account yet. Here's all users. So again, this is a simple 2-user system, so I have to pretend we have a large company here. So that's how you add a user. You just add them, invite them, they accept, and then you assign them their apps. Going back to admins, good to have 2 sometimes. You can also have what are called service admins, and this is for each of your applications. You may want to assign someone. So say for books, I want my CFO to be an admin just for books. I don't want him to be an admin for the entire system, but I can come over here and add a service admin, and he will be in charge of books. He can change people's roles without having me do it, just within that app. And so you can do that for all the apps. All the Zoho services can have a little local admin. The next feature is not used too heavily, but if you're a very large company, there are what's called groups. And so I could create a group here, and I will, and I'll call it finance. And these are all the people in the accounting department. I got to put a member in here. I'll put me in there. There's me. I could have other people. And the interesting thing about groups is you can have what's called a conditional assignment. I'm not going to go through this, but an assignment. So I could say if anybody's a member of the finance group, they get all the finance apps. They get books, they get inventory, they get invoice, they get expense. And so when I hire someone, I just say they're in finance. And by being a member of the finance group, they get all the finance apps because I wrote the rule already. So again, this is for large companies where I'm hiring someone every day and I got to go down the list of 45 apps and add them. I just want to say they're in finance. And then the conditional assignment will just take over and assign them whatever finance people need. I prefer myself to kind of tailor it. Sometimes the head of finance gets a slightly different set of apps than someone, say a bookkeeper or something. But groups is there. I'm going to kind of skip over domains. Domains is if there's 3 Zoho apps that one is Zoho Mail. You can actually use Zoho for your email. That would mean you stop using Exchange or stop using Google Mail. Actually move it here. You can also have Zoho host your website. Again, you'd add your domain to that. If Zoho's not hosting your website, and if Zoho's not hosting your email, you can just skip it. Be very careful, actually, if you go in here and add your domain, because your email might get moved in some cases without you doing it right. So, but this is where you add all the domains that you want to associate with your account. Security can be important. You can force a password policy here for all users. So that's the old, you got to change it every X days. It's got to be 10 letters long. You can't reuse the same one. You can also use multi-factor authentication, and I really like this a lot. We're going to talk one day about an app called Zoho One. It goes on your phone. For instance, what happens with me is if someone logs in as me on a new machine, my phone will bing. I have to use my face to open the app, and I can look at it and see where that person is, and then I can approve it or not. Once in a while, Lori logs in as me from Canada, and it scares me a little bit because haven't been in Canada in a while. But multi-factor authentication is nice. I think you're all familiar with it, where a password's not enough. It sends either a code to your phone. You can use a fingerprint. You can use your face. You can use a one-time notification. I do recommend you use multi-factor. However, here's the exception. If we're doing work for you and we need to log into your system, then it's kind of a pain, because if I log into your system as you, a code's going to go to your phone, could be in the middle of the night, and then you're not going to send it to me and I can't get in. We have a chat question here. Is email hosting and website hosting an extra charge, or is it included with the Zoho One subscription? AJ, it is included. The only extra charge might be $10 a year to register your domain name, which is what you'd pay to anybody. They are a domain registrar, Zoho is. And finally, the last security thing, I haven't seen it used, it is interesting, is you can only allow people to use Zoho from certain IPs, addresses. So if you only want them to use it, say, in the office, or you have 4 locations around the country, so you'd put in those 4 IP addresses, and then they couldn't use it from elsewhere. So it's kind of a geofencing thing where you can keep people from, it's a way to keep strangers out. Say somebody in Russia or something, you go, we're never going to go there. You can't really block an IP. You can only whitelist an IP. So you have to know the IPs you'd want. That's why I don't use it. I also travel a lot, and we all get on from different IP addresses. But you can really lock the system down, only be used certain places. So that's the security, and I do recommend you have a password policy. I think we've all seen where some people use the same password forever and no multi-factor. Zoho makes it easy with the one-off app. We'll talk about that as one of our sessions. Marketplace, there's 2 things here. The first one is applications. You can buy, or sometimes there's free add-ons. This is at the Zoho One level. There's also marketplace apps for, say, books and CRM. I haven't seen much in here that's useful, but telephone, this is where you set up Zoho to work with your phone system. And again, you used to be able to do it. You could connect CRM to the phone system, but if you use Zoho Desk, you might also want to use that, because you get tech support calls, and you'd have to configure the phone system there. And there are other places in Zoho where you might want to use the phone. So now I can actually connect my Zoho One, all apps, to the phone system. And if I click on it, you'll see there's about 60 different phone systems here. We use Ring Central. I always tell people there's a lot of phone systems in here, but there's never the one you want. These are all IP phone systems. If you have an IP phone system, there's a decent chance we can integrate with it. I really like having phone integration. We use Ring Central. I was actually on Vantage a long time ago, and these are all the different phone systems. And Vantage is on here now somewhere, right there. But 6 years ago when we switched over to Zoho, Vantage was not on the list. And since they weren't on the list, I dumped them and I went to Ring Central. But the Vantage, so I don't know how the Vantage works with Zoho because I had to go to Ring Central. So you set up the integration. You're just basically connecting your Zoho to your Vantage account. You hit the integrate button. You hit enable. It gives the two systems permission to talk to each other. It's pretty simple. I will show how this works, say out of CRM, maybe next week when we talk about CRM. But this is where you set it up. And it's kind of nice that they've moved it up a level. I don't have to set up phone systems on every one of my apps anymore. Active Directory, I'll just talk about very quickly. This is for Active Directory is a Microsoft protocol. If you have a Windows domain and say you have a very large company with 500 people and you don't want to have to add those 500 people to Zoho, you can actually download a little tool, put it on your Windows server, and it will send all your accounts up to Zoho and let you manage them. Again, it's easier to just type in 10 people, but if you had 500 people and you had to invite them all to join the company and set up an account and a password, that'd be a lot of work. Here, you can just take your Active Directory, which already has your Windows security and your Windows passwords, and you can just copy them up, and Zoho can be part of that. It's a one-way sync. That's kind of important. It will not touch or write into your Active Directory. A lot of IT guys wouldn't want that. No, but that's there. I've done it once or twice in my long Zoho life. Can't even remember because it's just easier to add 10 people or 20 people and add them as you go. A lot of companies start small and then just add people. They don't want to just throw the whole company onto Zoho in one move. There's some reports here at the end. It just shows me who's been added lately, who's been deactivated lately, logins, this kind of dashboard stuff that I get by going here to the dashboard. And so this is Zoho One. It's really how you manage your apps and your people and what they can do. It gives you a look into what's being used. It can enforce security. So kind of in the old Windows Server days, you had your Active Directory, your domain controller, and you would enforce security policies and make people change passwords. Now you do, as you move Zoho and you move into the cloud, this can all happen here. This is not something everybody needs to use, but everybody who has a Zoho One system, someone there needs to know how to go in here, turn on apps, add users, turn a user off. And that is the end of the session. I will say next week we're going to talk about CRM a little bit. Again, I started here because if you're new to Zoho, before you can even get into CRM, you've got to add the app and turn it on, and you got to assign users. So I felt like this was a logical place to start. So thank you, everybody. I will take questions now, and I'm going to stop recording right now. I'm going to unmute everybody, so be careful what you're doing.